So, what if I told you that there's a theory out there, a pretty wild one, that claims 4 specific numbers create a kind of hidden circuit, a closed return that connects the cosmos, ancient language, and maybe even our own technological future? It's a trip, weaving together things that feel like they have no business being connected. Let's just dive right into the puzzle.
And this is the central question, right? How on earth could a handful of numbers possibly link the way planets move, the number of strokes in a word, and the concept of a brain-computer interface? That's the mystery we're unpacking today, and it's all based on the work of an independent researcher named Zachary David Enfield.
All right, first up, the sequence kicks off with the number 13. Now, we all know it's a number loaded with all sorts of cultural baggage, but for this theory, you have to forget all that. Here, it's just the first building block.
Next in the lineup is 19. You're going to want to keep this one in your back pocket because the author presents it as both a container for the whole system and, kind of weirdly, a destination it returns to.
The third number is 91. And this might feel like it's coming out of left field, but we're told it acts as a kind of lock, connecting directly back to that first number, 13, in a really specific mathematical way.
And finally, we have 239. This is the big one. This is presented as the keystone of the entire structure, the number that supposedly makes the whole thing loop. So there you have it, 13, 19, 91, and 239. Now, let's see where the author claims to find the first connection.
To start, we're looking up. The search begins in the sky. The first place we're exploring is astronomy, what the author calls the Great Cosmic Clock, to see if these numbers are somehow written into the dance of the planets.
So, the opening act is this thing called the Great Conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. It happens, on average, just shy of every 20 years. The author rounds this down to 19, setting it up as the sort of heralding bead for the entire system.
But the real anchor, the structural lock for this whole idea, is apparently found with the moon. It's something called the Metonic cycle, which the author gives this really cool name, the moon spine. And this isn't some fringe idea. It's a real, well-known 19-year cycle that ancient calendars used to line up lunar and solar years.
And this is where the author claims the first 3 numbers just snap together. First, you've got the 19-year cycle itself, which he calls the shell. Okay, there's our 19. Now, to keep the calendar from drifting, you have to insert special 13-month years. Bam! There's our number 13. Finally, this insertion happens exactly 7 times over those 19 years. And here's the kicker. 7 times 13 is 91. Just like that, 13, 19, and 91 all pop up together, pulled from one single real astronomical cycle.
Okay, hold on, because this is where the theory takes a really sharp turn. We're leaving the world of astronomy and jumping straight into linguistics. The claim here is that this exact same 13, 19, 91 sequence is also encoded in language.
So check this out. The author points to the Japanese kanji for love, which is pronounced I. That character, I, has exactly 13 strokes. Then, using a simple code, A is 1, B is 2, all the way to I being 9, the letters I become 1 and 9, which you can write as 19. And then, the author just reverses them. Aya becomes 9 and 1, or 91. So all of a sudden, you have the same 13, 19, 91 sequence, but this time it's pulled from a totally different place.
So we have the sky, we have language, and now the author adds a third piece to the puzzle, sacred geometry. The idea is that the same numerical blueprint is also sitting right there in these ancient fundamental forms.
So the connection here is through the famous flower of life pattern. You've probably seen it before. It's made of 19 circles. And from that, you can pull out a core pattern of 13 circles called the fruit of life. So boom, there's our 19 and 13 again. But what about 91? Well, according to the author, it shows up as the 13th triangular number. That just means you literally add up all the whole numbers from 1 to 13, and guess what you get? 91. So there it is, the same sequence, now apparently showing up in a third, totally independent field.
And that brings us to the final piece of this whole thing, the number 239. The author doesn't just present this as the next number in line. No, this is the keystone. This is the number that supposedly locks it all together and creates that closed return.
Now, this is where it gets pretty complex. The argument is that 239 has 2 faces. The first one is called the calendar face. If you take 239 months and divide by 12, you get 19 and 91/67 years, a number that immediately looks a lot like 19 and 91. But then there's the animalistic face.
This uses a whole different lunar cycle based on the moon's distance from Earth. And 239 of these months equals a totally different amount of time, about 18 years.
This quote from the source text is really the key to the whole argument. The author is saying that these two values, 19.91 years and 18 years, they aren't a choice. It's not one or the other. They are two parallel, simultaneous, and valid readings of the number 239, just read through different kinds of cosmic clocks.
Okay, so how does this actually create a loop? Let's walk through the logic on the slide for the calendar face. The author does something called a numerological reduction on the leftover numbers from that 19.9167 calculation. The first step gives him the number 13. A second reduction of the leftover decimals gives him 6. According to the theory, you add those together, 13 plus 6, and you get 19. You've returned right back to the start of the sequence.
And he applies a similar process to that animalistic face. The year values from that clock are summed up, which he says reduces down to 9.1. Now remember that letter number system from the Japanese character? Applying that exact same rule, 9.1 is read as I and A, which gives you 91. So according to this theory, the two faces of 239 actually loop back to the other key numbers in the circuit, 19 and 91.
And just when you think you've heard it all, this is the final and frankly pretty mind-bending connection the theory makes. Using the exact same letter-to-number code from earlier, the one where A equals 1 and I equals 9, the author points out that the acronym for Brain-Computer Interface, BCI, becomes 2, 3, and 9. The claim is that the keystone number itself, 239, points directly to a future technology.
So let's take a step back and pull all of these different threads together. Let's look at the completed circuit, what the author calls the final closed return.
This flowchart basically lays out the entire argument. You follow the sequence to 239, which then splits into those two faces. One path returns to 19, the other returns to 91. The author then argues that these two paths connect back to each other through a final bit of logic, making the entire system loop back on itself. It's presented as this perfectly self-contained, self-referential system.
And the author's own conclusion is that the strength of this whole thing is its consistency. The same rules of astronomy, the same math, the same letter-number code are used throughout. Each piece is supposed to lock into the next, from the planets in the sky right down to the numbers that define the loop itself. And that, really, leaves us with the big question. Is this an astonishing hidden pattern woven into the very fabric of reality, a real signal in all the noise? Or is it just a masterful trick of the mind? A fascinating example of how powerful our brains are at finding patterns, even where none exist. The source material doesn't present this as an answer, but as a beginning. So after seeing the whole circuit, what do you see?